about colonialism, we often focus on the colonizers themselves. The violence and exploitation of empire is remembered as the work of distant rulers in London, Paris, Lisbon, and other metropoles. But the uncomfortable truth is that colonialism was not only imposed from outside, it was also enabled from within. Colonizers were never numerous enough to directly govern, extract resources, and control entire continents on their own. They did not have the capacity to micromanage and oversee every aspect of daily life. Instead, they cultivated allies within the colonized society, selecting those who are loyal to them to act as their agents on the ground. These local collaborators are known as compradors. In Latin, comparare means to purchase. Under European colonialism, the term came to refer to locals who sold out their own people, enabling colonial powers to exploit their own communities. The compradors were drawn mainly from the ranks of the elites, those privileged by wealth, education, or lineage, who offered themselves as the bridge between the colonizers and the colonized. And they were not confined to a single sphere. They could be policymakers, military officers, intellectuals, religious leaders, media figures, or even artists, all of whom became instruments through which colonial power penetrates various layers of society. Their primary mission was to uphold the power of the distant metropoles while securing for themselves personal rewards, whether through acquiring influence, protection, material benefits, and other privileges. One aspect of their work was the enforcement of colonial policies, such as collecting taxes, driving communities into forced labor, and selling off natural resources. In India, for instance, the British colonizers put in place the zamindar system. The permanent settlement of 1793 granted them control over land revenue. The zamindars kept a share of the collected money, while the rest was passed to the British. Acting as the local extension of the empire, they enriched themselves as the wider population was impoverished. The Bengal famine revealed the cruelty of this system. While British policies were to blame, but also the zamindars worsened the disaster by hoarding grain as the population starved. The Caribbean offers another variation. In Cuba, under Spanish rule, the sugarocracy, as in the Cuban elite who owned sugar plantations, had turned the island into a vast sugar machine. Built on the backs of enslaved people, it fed both Spain's empire and their own pockets. They were both beneficiaries and guarantors of the colonial power, an order that shaped Cuba for centuries. Whenever global sugar prices rose, these elites prospered. When prices collapsed, these elites kept their riches intact while workers sank deeper into misery. It is no surprise that many sugar workers eventually rallied behind the rebel army, which led the 1959 Cuban Revolution to victory. But elsewhere in the colonized world, revolutions did not always succeed. In fact, another central dimension of the elite's role was policing dissent. Whenever workers and peasants dared to break their chains, these collaborators moved quickly to sabotage their hopes from within. Hand in hand with the colonial authority, they crushed uprisings, subverted popular movements, sowed divisions, and blocked every genuine path to liberation. They denounced those who resisted as criminals, outlaws, or terrorists, accusations borrowed straight from the colonizers themselves. In doing so, they became the loudest promoters of colonial way of thinking. As violent as the repression was the poison of their ideology, they normalized colonialism through contaminating people's minds. They spread a distorted narrative that crept into colonized people's consciousness, persuading them to see exploitation as development, dependency as progress, and obedience as the sole foundation of stability. Submission was recast as a virtue to the point where the colonized were even praised as better human beings when they aligned themselves with the colonizers. In the Portuguese colonies, there were the assimilados, those labeled civilized for adopting Portuguese language, religion, and lifestyle. In return, they were granted limited rights that set them apart from the rest of the colonized population. Similarly, under French and Belgian colonial rule, the évolué emerged. Shaped by European schooling and culture, They were entrusted with upholding the colonial agenda and displayed as symbols of its civilizing mission. And this class is not confined to the past. One of the most dangerous illusions of the post-colonial era is the belief that colonialism ended with the withdrawal of foreign troops and the drafting of new constitutions. Colonialism rarely disappears, it mutates. What is celebrated as independence is often nothing more than a facade of transition, with colonizers installing new leaders groomed to carry on the very same work but presenting it under a new guise. Today, under US hegemony, the empire that inherited the role once played by Europe, the comprador class persists. They may no longer stand at the head of plantations with whips in their hands, but the essence of their function remains unchanged. These elites allow political and economic policies to be dictated by external powers, acting as channels for neoliberal agendas. In doing so, they drain natural wealth, degrade nature, and entrench poverty, handing over land and resources as accomplices in the systematic looting of their own nations. What is surrendered is the very future of an entire people. Meanwhile, they parrot American talking points, whitewashing war crimes, demonizing resistance movements, and mocking even the most peaceful acts of disobedience, such as boycotts, stripping the colonized of every tool to challenge domination. The goal is total pacification. That is why the struggle cannot stop at exposing empire alone. Liberation requires resisting not only the powers abroad, but also their instruments at home. The enemy is twofold: the structures of neocolonialism and those who act as its domestic pillars. As Walter Rodney reminds us, to fight imperialism is to fight the local ruling class, which is its tool. The struggle is one and the same.